euros or 4% of your worldwide annual turnover, whichever is greater. And it has the largest effective area of the whole of Europe. And it doesn't only apply to companies in Europe, but the moment that you deal with the personal data of someone in Europe, not citizens, not residents, but someone on European soil, the GDPR applies. 3.5 minutes ago.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good overview. So I'll go a little bit into the California Consumer Privacy Act. Give you a little background to kind of set the stage for what a cluster the CCPA is that a little over a year ago, I can't remember the guy's name now, it's slipping, but there was a real estate mogul in California who had a desire for people's privacy to be protected. So he put together a ballot initiative with a very severe anti-business spin on consumer privacy law. So pretty similar to the GDPR, more individual-centric, and you all know that there are some notable tech players that are located in California who deal a lot in data, and so they reacted quickly, and in order for the legislature to kind of head off this ballot initiative, which I guess it's much more difficult to change text of law that's adopted through a ballot initiative than it is through the legislative process. So they, in 8 days, they put together the California Consumer Privacy Act, passed it, and then this last summer, or this last legislative session, they were supposed to fix some of it. They fixed a little bit of it. But generally, it changes the paradigm in the U.S. law as related to consumer privacy. Puts a lot more rights in the hands of consumers. So similar to GDPR, they call it the right to have your data deleted. And so you have to really track where you store people's data, and if someone makes that request and it doesn't fall under one of the exceptions, you need to get rid of it. It has data portability, the right for you to see who they have disclosed your information to. So if you're covered under the law, you can make a request to the company and say, I want a list of all the entities who you shared my data with. And so you have to provide that. So from our end, from a compliance perspective, the data inventory and the data tracking of where your data lies and how it flows through your company is one of the most important things to keep track of for compliance, so that you can make, if someone makes a request, you don't have to go figure it out in 30 or 45 days, however long you have to respond. You have it there initially. Trying to look at my notes here. One of the notable items of the CCPA is that it has introduced a private right of action for individuals to sue an entity for a data breach if their information is stored by that company. What has been sort of a wall for previous actions like that is the damages aspect of that. So it's very difficult to show, well, you have my name and my email and my children's name. So what's the damage if that gets out in public? And that's where a lot of those previous lawsuits have failed. Well, the CCPA has introduced a statutory damage. So you can imagine if you have 100,000 consumers, statutory damage will range from $100 to $750 based on circumstances. So you multiply data subjects by $100, that's per occurrence. So if there's multiple breaches by different parties, you're really talking the company litigation, and a lot of plaintiffs' lawyers with a lot of motivation in order to bring a class action lawsuit for even a simple data breach where really the value of the data is minimal. So with that background, I'm going to kind of move on, since we are at a blockchain conference. Silvan and I will kind of address considerations under the privacy laws of storing data on the blockchain. So I'll turn it over to you just to kind of discuss what you've run into with blockchain companies particularly and how they want to store data within the parameters of the GDPR.
Yeah, I think in general, if you look at blockchain and personal data, there are a lot of great use cases that you can pursue by having personal data on the blockchain. And of course, that's where everyone says like, well, it's an immutable ledger, it's an immutable system. We don't want to store our data on there. But under the GDPR, there are quite a few further considerations that you will have to think about. It's not only the immutability of blockchain, and if you put personal data on blockchain, that you don't really have the possibility to either rectify or delete that later on in most circumstances. It is also that the GDPR foresees very clear roles for the different participants, and that is according to a model that is very suitable for cloud model, for cloud services perhaps, or for client service firm model. However, if you look at the decentralized environment, that is very tricky to determine who is actually responsible. Is there a node that is responsible for the processing of my data? Is there an entity that's actually responsible? And in private networks, consortium settings, that is a little bit easier. But if you would look at public permissionless networks, that is a real challenge. Yeah, there are a couple of other things, other considerations that blockchain companies will have to deal with, or those pursuing, also those that are just setting up the infrastructure for a public permissionless network could under the GDPR have a certain responsibility for data, because they essentially, by setting up a system or developing a protocol, you may be seen as defining the means and purpose for processing, which under the GDPR could make you primarily responsible. So there are a lot of questions in that direction. So this is not really clarified. The guidance so far on the GDPR is very limited. Probably the most important guidance that we have at this point is guidance on what actually constitutes anonymization versus pseudonymization. And that's a document from 2014, pre-GDPR era, and is not officially endorsed by the highest regulator in this area. So also knowing what is actually personal data, if it's pseudonymized data, we still need to see it as in the scope of the GDPR, and therefore be able to comply with all these requirements. But the moment that we can say it's anonymized, that is certainly something that's where we have more flexibility.
Excellent. So, from the CCPA perspective, I think one of the distinctions between the CCPA and the GDPR is that the GDPR is a law of general applicability. So everybody who collects data is subject to it. California has set some parameters or qualifications that define you as a business under the law. Usually when I talk to clients, one of the first ones is a $25 million revenue qualification. So if you're under that, it doesn't apply. But as I was preparing for this conference, I realized that the other two are probably extremely applicable to this crowd. And it is if you are collecting and processing 50,000 either personal records, household records, or device records. So once you start getting Internet of Things, and you're collecting data from different devices that collect personal data, so whether it's a Fitbit or a health monitor or a Alexa or one of those personal assistants, if you get up to 50,000, you can reach that pretty quick. And then the last one is whether 50% of your revenue comes from selling personal information that's defined in the law. The law defines it very broadly. So those are probably actually two more applicable qualifications for this crowd than really necessarily $25 million, which is either cut or dry, either already on. Similar to the GDPR, I think that the right to be deleted under the CCPA has some designations or some difficulties for blockchain companies, but some of that's addressed. The other thing is the private right of action. So if someone can see your personal data stored on a blockchain, if it's a public blockchain or an open blockchain, that could be considered a data breach, and so that would subject you to liability under the statute. So now I think what's great is you have two lawyers up here, or legal consultants mostly, kind of describe what the law says, and that's part of what I love about my job, is I just tell you what you have to do, and then turn it over to Estrella and Hans, and they're the people who actually have to figure out how you comply. So I'll turn it over to Estrella. She's actually led some companies through GDPR compliance and starting to consult CCPA, the company you work for. So can you kind of describe, from a business perspective, some of the challenges and some of the advice you may have for people who are driving compliance on the business level?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from the bad business, and I'm the part of the organization that says, yeah, that's nice, but what do we really have to do? And so part of what I've done in the past and what I'm doing today is really just looking at what is the legislation that is out there, what is the technology that is available to us, and really start to scope out how we're going to be compliant and really identify the levels of risk that we're willing to adopt or accept. So, for example, working with an organization in the Bay Area, they said, yeah, that's really nice, CCPA is coming, we are based in California, but how much do we really have to comply? Because, GDPR said we had to comply, but are they really going to come after us? And it's like, well, now you're in the jurisdiction now, homie. Like, we need to all start to comply. So really just starting to build out, what does that roadmap look like? What technologies are available? What assets, both with individual people, humans, as well as technology assets, are going to help the organization, or currently in my current role, help us to make sure that we're compliant and we're also not impacting our sales and marketing team's ability to market and sell to consumers and market and sell to data citizens and to serve our clients. Because at the end of the day, we are an organization that needs to be profitable, but we really want to make sure that we're doing that. And so we've adopted multiple technologies. We've really implemented a lot of policies, and I know you do a lot of policy stuff, but it's really a big education approach that we're taking, and really just educating the individuals in the organization so that we make sure everybody's aware, they understand, and they understand what their role is in the process. Because I'll ask a question of the audience, is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So what is your biggest protection layer in a firewall for your organization or any organization? What's the number one biggest thing, or one thing that's going to protect you the most? What was that?
I just said duct tape.
Duct tape. A lot of companies try that, or an Excel macro, right? Yeah.
Shutting off
Those
ports.
are super secure. What's that?
Shutting off ports.
Shutting off ports, yeah. Well, those are all really good. What was that? Training, yeah. So I think that, I firmly believe, the biggest protector is the human being, the actual employee or the person that is using that information. And so a lot of the approaches that we use from the business side is working in coordination with our technologists, with our legal teams and our legal counsel to really make sure that, again, everybody is aware, they're trained, they're up to speed, and they know how to process this information. Did I answer your question? It's a really long answer.
No, that was great. So now, as we all know, crap kind of flows downhill, and you have the people at the legislatures who make the policy, you have the lawyers who interpret that policy and give advice to the businesses, then you have the business representatives, compliance directors like Estrella, who then go to the data architects like Hans and say, all right, this is what we have to do, figure out how to do it. So what are some techniques that you have seen implemented, or strategies that have been adopted to drive privacy compliance, just generally? I mean, GDPR probably specifically in the world that you live in, because California is not probably quite so high on the data security part of it, but they just make you pay if you don't do it right. So if you could kind of give us some advice or some life lessons on that.
Pointers or whatever, yeah. Let me crawl out of the basement though first, since we're the lowest rung of everyone here. No, I guess just to preface it, Just two quick things. One thing I would say is that, as far as do you have to comply with these rules, I think you can just all say, yeah, check the box, you ought to comply with these rules. I mean, everyone, I think, can agree if you research it. California legislation is national legislation. Just call it that. I mean, if you have a website, if you work with anybody who's actually got a false, you're subject to what's going on there. Same thing for EU. I always tell people I'm like the worst nightmare for people. First Bank, I know some people here from First Bank, whatever. Name any other Colorado company that I'm working with because I live here. I also am Swedish citizen in the EU, and I also spend half my time there. So I'm on the ground, boots on the ground in Europe and an EU citizen. So now that law applies to all of you as well. So, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. I'm not the only person in that boat. So check the box for compliance, and of course, if it's not one of those laws, it'll be one of the pending other 14, 15 states laws, whatever else is going down. So now the question is, how do we do it, right? So how do we comply? Part of that is going to be achieving a certain level of data maturity, where you know how to actually identify where you have personally identifiable information that can be managed in a good enterprise way, which I can tell you from being in this field for like 30 years, it ain't good where you're right now. It's pretty much got problems. There's silos, there's copies, there's anomalies, there's key clashes, there's all kinds of issues. So figuring out where it is and how it works is a huge thing. And then managing that in a way that you're mature enough where you can represent that information back to someone who asks. And you can also delete and prove that you delete that information if I want to be forgotten, which is, again, these are not easy things to do. And the place where we should be today in data maturity should be pretty easy. In the place where we actually are today, no, it's not easy. So that's an issue. Now, if we kind of circle back to why we're here today, probably, is in the blockchain world. I mean, there's really, without getting deep into it, we can say a couple of quick things, right? One is, if your right to be forgotten means that you have to delete that information, you're not allowed to house, keep, hold that information because it's not yours, right? You have to get rid of it. Now you're saying to yourself, well, something like an immutable record on a ledger, like an accounting ledger, actually, if you want to think of it that way, there is no way to just delete the journal entry you did. You have to put in a reversing entry, but the original one is still there. Well, this is basically saying the original one can't be there. You have to get rid of it. So if you think of it just the premise of blockchains, the problem is that personally identifiable information in itself that can uniquely identify you outside of the system organization's whatever definition. It's not necessarily by itself a good place for that. But ironically, it's also a phenomenal tool that can be used to really enhance privacy just ridiculously well. Because we can transact in a trusted way with identities that are immutable and very usable for us without the details that makes that person identifiable. So in a way, it's part of a solution set that we've never had that kind of great capability before. Because again, somewhere, somehow, that information that stores what you're not allowed to have is usually tied to the way it's keyed and the way we work with it. Here we can separate those things, which is huge. So we have a phenomenal opportunity to make that work. Okay, so, but and again, I could have a deep discussion with James, what's your secretary name? Maybe, with Scott, of course, we can have a debate about this topic. My feeling is that you can never have a solution that works with people that isn't a hybrid solution. You're never going to have a full blockchain solution. But again, probably a debate over drinks later. But I think let's utilize and leverage the things that we do that are strong in each one of the platforms and architectures we use. But on the onset, recognize the characteristics and the issues we have.
Awesome. I didn't mean to say you were at the bottom. I just meant that all the responsibility usually falls on people who actually do the work, right? I mean, people who figure out, like, technically, how do we comply? So, You know, you mentioned kind of the hybrid solution. Silvan, in your work in Germany and the EU, how are you advising clients who want to implement blockchain into their product or their offering or be a blockchain company? How do you suggest that they navigate those requirements?
It's a good question, but perhaps to expand a little bit on so we also work on the technical side, we work on the legal side, right? So it's perhaps a little bit broader than that. So in the end, and that's what lawyers like to say, it all depends on the details, right? And we're talking about blockchain and GDPR in general, but there is nothing general.
Right.
Everything works differently. And to give you a bit of perspective on for example, this right to erasure or right to be forgotten and personal data on a blockchain. For example, do you want to have personal data in a potentially public system where it's very hard or impossible to delete? Probably not a great idea. But is it impossible? I also don't think it's impossible. Blockchain, blockchain, what is there? We have over 2,000 protocols out there, I believe. Just look at the market cap, what's in there. At least there are tons of protocols out there, and everything works a little bit differently. But already in the original Bitcoin.pdf white paper, Satoshi Nakamoto 10 years ago, there was a concept of pruning implemented in there. Is it being used? Not really, but is it possible? I would say certainly. So from that point of view, I would say there is an opportunity to explore possibilities of over time deleting certain data points from blockchain. Of course, you then still have extended problems with that information being copied to different nodes, and you don't know what those different nodes do with the information. But also then looking at the GDPR, at this right to be forgotten, that's also not absolute. That is under certain conditions. If data is processed under consent, for example, you can revoke consent, in which case it has to be deleted, but it's certainly not something that is 100% absolute. There are also legal bases that would be persistent.
Okay, that's great. Another solution that I've heard is where the individual is in charge of their data, and they are the one granting permission through a blockchain application. And essentially, they, from my understanding, would have the power to just shut themselves off. Doesn't mean the data isn't still there.
Yeah, I think what you mean is the household exception. There's a household exception if data is not being processed commercially but for household use. And you could argue that a private user interacting with the blockchain directly may fall under the household exception. That's one possibility. Or the second possibility is you could argue that they are the controller of the data themselves. Now, good luck enforcing something against yourself.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think give creative people like Hans and good consultants like Silvan time, and they'll figure out ways that we can get around laws, but or at least make less of an impact. But I think Hans is right. From my perspective, and I've gone from drafting website privacy policies when websites were, here's our company, here's information about our company, and if you want to contact us, call this salesperson at XYZ. Right now to Facebooks and LinkedIn's and people who are performing commerce as their sole outlet for consumers. So that the transition has been just in 11 years has been phenomenal. And I think now, at least from my perspective, the law and the public sentiment is changing to be like, I don't want all that information out there anymore. Or if it is, I want to have some control over it to be able to stop people from using it. So from that perspective, data is, and I'll give you guys time to respond. Data is an asset, and data is commerce. And I don't think that's going to change, obviously, with the Internet of Things and everything else progressing that way. but the respect for the individual is going to have to be worked into the design of products going forward. Anybody want to add some closing statements?
Are we over on time? Okay, well, so I think that the big thing for all of us just to really consider as practitioners in this space is that the protection of data privacy is something that we have to be thinking about as organizations, big or small. So whether that's with the people that are touching our data every single day or building the technologies to support that or designing your programs or what you're doing with that in mind, I think we always need to be mindful of that. The world is changing. California is showing that the US is starting to get on board. So it's really important that not only are we thinking about how we're going to fix and solve for everything that we've done in the past, but how are we going to step into the future, recognizing that we need to protect the rights of our data consumers, our data citizens, and just all of the people that we engage with day to day.
We're all good. Thank you, panel. That went very well. So appreciate your time and your input.
We're going to kick back in here in 8 minutes, it looks like. And again, there's 2 sessions running, so find out what the other one is. Hold on a second. Okay, so in this room we're doing trends in state blockchain regulation. And that has 3 members who will be on the panel discussion. And in the other room, which I believe is true, yep. We have just the one other session. What would you do if legal challenges got in the way of your business progressing? That's another panel for people. So, panel, either room, join us.